The sky above the city of Tokyo did not simply turn dark, it shattered like a pane of glass hit by a hammer. There was no warning siren, because the disaster moved faster than sound could travel. A jagged hole tore open in the middle of the clouds and it bled colors that had no name. The air suddenly tasted like burning ozone and old graves. It was a violent breach of the laws that kept universes separate. Gravity stopped working for 5 seconds and cars floated off the highway before crashing down hard. People on the street fell to their knees as a wave of invisible pressure rolled over the city. It felt like the whole world had missed a heartbeat. High in the distorted sky, a single figure fell through the jagged crack in reality. He was spinning out of control. Smoke trailed from his red and blue suit. The mechanical spider legs on his back were bent and sparking with yellow energy that did not belong in this dimension. This was not a controlled landing. It was a crash. The boy inside the mask was Peter Parker, but his technology was failing. The display inside his lenses flashed red warnings he could not read. He tried to shoot a web line to catch a skyscraper, but the fluid turned to dust as soon as it hit the air. The physics of this place were wrong, and his equipment could not adjust fast enough. The spiritual energy of the earth reacted instantly to the intruder. In the hidden places of Japan, ancient things woke up. The spirits that lived in tunnels and shrines felt a vibration that hurt them. It was like a loud bell ringing inside their heads. The turbo granny stopped her cursing deep in a tunnel and looked up with fear for the first time in years. The Serpo aliens lost control of their cloaking shields and their ships flickered into view for a split second, causing panic on the streets below. The balance between the physical world and the spirit world was breaking. The falling boy slammed into a large park in the Shinjuku district. The impact blew out the windows of every building for 3 blocks. Trees were flattened and the ground turned to glass where he landed. A crater formed that was deep enough to hide a bus. Peter lay in the center of the hole. His suit was torn and his chest heaved as he tried to breathe the strange air. He was a teenager who had fought supervillains and goblins, but he had never felt a universe reject him like this. He was not alone. The crack in the sky did not close immediately. Black sludge dripped from the edge of the hole. It was a piece of the chaos from the space between worlds. It fell silently and landed on a statue of a guardian dog near the crater. The stone cracked and the black sludge soaked into it. The statue's stone eyes began to glow a deep and angry red. Peter forced himself to stand up. His head was spinning. He tapped his earpiece to call his team. He called for Iron Fist or White Tiger, but only static answered him. Then the static changed. It became a voice. It was not a radio signal. It was a voice speaking directly into his brain. It sounded like 1,000 people whispering at once. His spider sense screamed so loud it made him fall back to his knees. The shadows in the park began to stretch and stand up. They were not just lack of light. They were alive. They were yokai, and they were angry that he was here. Peter raised his fists. His web shooters were jammed. His jetpack was broken. He was a long way from Queens. The statue he had landed near crumbled, and a massive hand made of stone and black slime reached for him. The first fight of the new world was starting, and the city was already paying the price. The black slime monster roared, and the sound was like metal grinding on bone. Peter Parker rolled to the left just as a massive fist smashed the concrete where his head had been a second ago. He was tired, and his lungs burned. The air in this city was heavy. It felt thick like soup. Every time he took a breath, he tasted iron and old dust. He fired a web line at the monster's face, but the fluid just slid off the wet slime. It was useless. His lenses zoomed in on the creature. It was shaped like a dog, but it stood on 2 legs and was 10 feet tall. Its eyes were burning red coals. This was not not a normal villain. This was not the Rhino or Venom. This was something else entirely. Peter jumped high into the air. He used his mechanical spider legs to push off a falling tree. He needed height. He needed to think. The city around him was loud. Sirens were wailing in the distance, but no police cars were coming close. The crater he had made was smoking. The monster grabbed a chunk of the broken street and threw it. Peter saw it coming. His spider sense screamed at him. It was a sharp pain in the back of his skull. It was louder than usual. It felt like a radio turned up to maximum volume. He dodged the rock in mid-air, but the wind from it spun him around. He landed on a lamppost and it bent under his weight. He looked at his wrist shooter. The display was flickering. His suit was trying to analyze the energy of the monster, but it kept giving error messages. The energy was not radiation. It was not electricity. It was unknown. The monster charged at the lamppost. It moved fast for something so big. Peter leapt away again. He landed on the side of a building. He stuck to the wall, but his grip felt weak. The static charge that let him climb walls was acting strange. The building itself felt like it was vibrating. Peter realized that the whole city was vibrating. He tapped his earpiece again. He hoped to hear Nick Fury or Nova. He heard nothing but a low humming sound. He was on his own. He looked down at the monster. It was climbing the building after him. Its claws dug into the bricks like they were soft clay. Peter knew he could not keep running. He had to stop this thing before it hurt someone. He made a fist. He activated the electric shock webs in his shooters. If the sticky webs did not work, maybe electricity would. He waited until the monster was close. He could smell the rotten mud that dripped from its body. He fired. 2 bolts of yellow lightning shot from his wrists. They hit the monster right in the chest. The creature howled. The slime bubbled and smoked. But it did not stop. The electricity seemed to make it angrier. The red eyes glowed brighter. The monster swiped its hand and hit the wall. The impact shook the whole building. Peter lost his grip and fell. He fell 3 stories and hit the pavement hard. His energy shield absorbed some of the crash, but his ribs ached. He rolled onto his back. The monster jumped down from the wall to crush him. Peter held up his hands. He braced for the end, but the end did not come. Suddenly, the monster froze in the air. It stopped falling. A pink light surrounded its body. It floated there, struggling against an invisible grip. Peter blinked. He did not know what was happening. He scrambled backward to get some distance. He looked around to see who had saved him. Miles away, in a quiet neighborhood, Momo Ayase dropped her school bag. She had felt the shockwave when the sky broke. It had knocked the pictures off her walls. Her grandmother was not home. Momo was alone. She had run outside to see the smoke rising from Shinjuku. Then her phone buzzed. It was Okarun. He was panicking. He said the spirits in his room were going crazy. He said Turbo Granny was yelling about a hole in the world. Momo told him to meet her at the train station. She knew they had to go to the smoke. It was their job. They dealt with aliens and spirits. This looked like both. When they met, Okarun looked pale. He was shaking. He adjusted his glasses nervously. He told Momo that the air felt wrong. He said it felt like the atmosphere on an alien ship, but mixed with the smell of a graveyard. They ran toward the disaster. The trains were stopped, so they had to run. As they got closer, the feeling got worse. Momo felt a headache building behind her eyes. Her psychokinetic powers were reacting to the pressure in the air. She felt like something was pushing back against her mind. They reached the park and saw the devastation. Trees were snapped like twigs. The ground was torn up, and in the middle of it all was the monster. It was a guardian spirit, but it was corrupted. It was leaking dark energy, and below it, on the ground, was a boy in a red and blue suit. Momo had never seen a suit like that. It looked like a robot, but it moved like a human. She saw the mechanical legs on his back. She thought he must be an alien. The Serpo aliens used machines. Maybe this was a new type of soldier. But then she saw him flinch. She saw him hold his ribs. Aliens did not usually show pain like that. Aliens were cold and stiff. This person moved with fear. Momo made a choice. She reached out with her mind. She visualized a giant hand grabbing the monster. She focused her will. Her hands glowed with pink energy. She caught the monster in mid-air. It was heavy. Her brain strained under the weight. She gritted her teeth. She shouted at Ocaran to help. Ocaran nodded. He was scared, but he knew what to do. He touched the turbo dial on his shoulder. His body changed. His hair stood up and turned white. A mask covered his face. He crouched down low. He became the Turbo Granny form. He moved so fast he vanished. He appeared instantly next to the floating monster. He kicked it with incredible speed. The impact sounded like a cannon shot. The monster flew backward and crashed into a pile of rubble. Momo let out a breath and dropped her hands. The pink light faded. Peter watched all of this with wide eyes. He stood up slowly. He saw the girl with the glowing hands. He saw the boy who had turned into a demon. He assumed they were more villains. In his world, people with powers were usually bad news unless he knew them, and he did not know these two. The boy looked like a goblin or a vampire. The girl looked normal, but she had just used telekinesis. Peter raised his fists again. His mechanical legs extended and pointed at them like spears. He was ready to fight. Momo saw the robot man aim at them. She frowned. She yelled at him. She asked him who he was. She asked if he was with the Serpo. Peter did not understand the name. He heard Japanese. He knew a little Japanese from his science classes and anime, but she was speaking too fast and using slang he did not know. He tried to speak English. He told them to stay back. He said he did not want to hurt them. He said he was an Avenger in training. Momo looked at Ocaran. Ocaran shrugged. He did not speak English well. He only knew words from video games. He thought the robot man said something about revenge. That was bad. Revenge meant he wanted to fight. Ocaran hissed. The Turbo Granny spirit inside him was agitated. It told him that the robot man smelled like another dimension. It said the robot man was a glitch in the universe. It said they should kill him before he broke reality even more. Ocaran did not want to kill anyone, but he was afraid. The spirit's fear bled into his mind. He growled at Peter. Peter took the growl as a threat. He shot a web at Ocaran. The web hit Ocaran's shoulder. It stuck for a second before dissolving into dust. Ocaran was surprised. He looked at the white goo. It was gross. He got angry. He dashed forward. He moved faster than Peter expected. Peter's spider sense warned him just in time. He ducked. Ocaran's claw slashed the air where Peter's neck had been. Peter did a backflip. He kicked Ocaran in the chest. Ocaran slid back but did not fall. He was durable. Momo saw the fight start. She did not want to hurt the stranger, but he had attacked first. She clapped her hands together. She visualized a box. She created a cube of psychic energy around Peter. Peter hit the invisible wall. He was trapped. He pounded on the barrier. It was hard as steel. He looked at Momo. He realized she was the dangerous one. He needed to break her concentration. He activated his sonic disruptor. It was a gadget he used against venom. It made a high-pitched noise. The noise blasted out of his suit. It was awful. Windows nearby shattered. Momo screamed and covered her ears. Her concentration broke. The invisible box vanished. Peter was free. He launched himself at Momo. He did not want to hit a girl, but he had to stop her from using her mind powers. He shot a web at her feet to trip her. This time, the web held for a few seconds. Momo fell. Okaran saw her fall. He screamed. He charged at Peter again. This time he was going full speed. Peter saw him coming. He calculated the angle. He used his mechanical legs to anchor himself to the ground. He caught Okaran's charge. They collided with a boom. Peter slid back 10 feet, digging furrows in the road. Okaran was pushing against him with massive strength. They were locked together. Peter looked into Okaran's masked face. He saw the glowing eyes. He saw the sharp teeth. "You are just a kid," Peter said. He realized the monster was small. It was a transformed teenager, just like him. Peter hesitated. He did not want to use his full strength. That hesitation cost him. Okaran twisted his body and kicked Peter in the stomach. Peter flew into a parked car. The car crumpled. The fight had drawn attention. High above the city, a spaceship uncloaked. It was shaped like a giant sleek disc. Inside the ship, the Serpo aliens were watching the battle on a screen. They were tall and pale, with no faces, just smooth skin. They spoke in a monotone digital language. They analyzed the energy readings from Peter. They saw that his cells were vibrating at a different frequency than this universe. He was a dimensional traveler. To the Serpo, this was valuable. They needed his biological data to improve their own teleportation technology. They decided to intervene. They did not care about the damage. They only wanted the specimen. A beam of blue light shot down from the ship. It hit the street between the fighters. The asphalt melted instantly. Peter, Momo, and Okaran were thrown back by the blast. Dust filled the air. When the dust cleared, 5 tall figures stood in the crater. They were Serpo drones. They wore silver suits and held strange weapons. They looked at Peter. One of them pointed a device at him. A robotic voice spoke in broken English. It said, "Target acquired." It said, "Prepare for extraction." Peter groaned and stood up. He looked at the new arrivals. Aliens. Actual aliens. He was getting tired of this day. He looked at Momo and Okaran. They were standing up too. They looked at the aliens with recognition. They had fought these things before. Peter realized they were enemies of the aliens too. That changed the math. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. At least for now. Peter raised his hand. He pointed at the aliens. He looked at the Japanese kids. He made a gesture that meant let us work together. Momo understood. She nodded. She did not trust the robot man, but she hated the Serpo more. Okaran spat on the ground and got into a fighting stance. The 3 of them stood in a line. The Serpo drones marched forward. They fired lasers. Peter dodged and shot webs at their eyes. The webs worked better on the metal suits than on the spirits. One drone was blinded. Momo picked up the blinded drone with her mind and threw it into another one. They crashed together in a spark of metal. Okaran dashed through the group. He moved so fast he was a blur. He ripped the weapon out of a drone's hand. But there were more coming. The ship above released a swarm of smaller flying drones. They buzzed like angry wasps. They had saws attached to their bodies. Peter saw the swarm. He knew they could not win this in an open street. There were too many, and his suit was running out of power. The dimensional static was draining his battery. He needed to retreat. He needed to repair his tech. He grabbed a manhole cover with a web and ripped it open. He pointed at the hole. He yelled at the kids to go. Momo hesitated. She did not want to run. This was her city. But Okaran grabbed her arm. He saw the swarm too. He knew they would be cut to pieces. He pulled her toward the manhole. They jumped in. Peter followed them. He shot a web net over the hole to seal it. He landed in the dark water of the sewer. The sounds of the battle above were muffled. It was quiet down here, and it was dark. Peter turned on his mask lights. The white beams cut through the gloom. He saw the two kids standing in the sewage. They looked at him with suspicion. The boy had turned back to normal. He was just a skinny kid with glasses again. He looked exhausted. The girl was hugging herself. She looked angry. Peter raised his hands to show he was empty-handed. He retracted his mechanical spider legs. He pulled off his mask. He wanted them to see he was not a robot. He was just a boy. He had brown hair and tired eyes. He had a bruise forming on his cheek. He looked at them and took a deep breath. He tried to speak slowly. He said his name was Peter. He said he was lost. He said he did not know how he got here. Momo looked at him. She saw the fear in his eyes. It was the same fear she felt. She relaxed slightly. She did not drop her guard completely, but she stopped glowing. She told him her name was Momo. She pointed at the boy and said, "Okarun." The introduction was short. The sewer tunnel rumbled as the ship above fired a heavy weapon. Dust fell from the ceiling. They were not safe yet. Peter tapped his wrist computer. He projected a small hologram of the city map. It was glitchy and red. He showed them the map. He pointed to a spot that looked like a safe house or a subway station. He mimed moving there. He needed a place to fix his gear. Momo shook her head. She pointed to a different direction. She pointed deeper into the tunnels. She knew where the spirits lived. She knew that the Serpo aliens did not like deep underground places because the spiritual energy interfered with their senses. She was suggesting they hide in the territory of the yokai. Peter did not understand the logic, but he trusted her confidence. She seemed to know the rules of this world better than him. He nodded. They began to walk deeper into the dark. The water sloshed around their ankles. Peter felt the spider sense buzzing at the back of his neck. It was a constant warning. The tunnels were full of things that watched from the shadows. He saw eyes glowing in the drain pipes. He saw shapes moving in the water. He kept his hands ready near his web shooters. As they walked, Peter tried to analyze what had happened. His universe had laws. Gravity worked, time worked, biology worked. Here those things were suggestions. The boy had transformed into a monster and back. The girl used telekinesis. The monster in the park was made of slime and hate, and his own tech was failing. The particles in the air were attacking his circuitry. He needed to adapt. He was a scientist. He needed data. He looked at Okarun. He wondered how the transformation worked. Was it genetic? Was it magic? Okarun felt Peter staring. He shrank back. He was shy. He was not used to being looked at by cool American teenagers. He felt the turbo granny in his mind. The old spirit was laughing. She said the spider boy tasted like ozone and sadness. She said he was carrying a curse. She said the curse was called responsibility. Okarun did not understand what she meant. He just wanted to go home and eat curry. Suddenly the tunnel shook violently. A crack appeared in the ceiling. Debris fell. A beam of blue light cut through the darkness. The Serpo had found them. Their sensors had pierced the ground. A drone dropped through the hole. It hovered over the water. Its red eye scanned them. It began to charge a weapon. Peter reacted on instinct. He did not have enough web fluid to blind it. He grabbed a loose pipe from the wall. He threw it like a javelin. The pipe hit the drone's engine. The drone exploded. "Run," Peter yelled. They ran. They splashed through the filthy water. More drones dropped through the ceiling behind them. The aliens were drilling down. They were relentless. Peter fell to the back of the group to cover them. He fired small web pellets to distract the drones. Momo used her mind to pull down support beams and block the path. Ocaran ran ahead to scout. They reached a junction. To the left was a maintenance tunnel. To the right was an old subway line. Ocaran pointed right. They dashed into the subway tunnel. It was dry here. There were old tracks. They ran along the tracks. The drones were getting closer. Peter could hear the buzzing. He checked his web fluid levels. He was at 10%. He had almost nothing left. He reached into his belt and pulled out a small device. It was a spider tracer. He modified the frequency. He hoped to create a signal jammer. He stopped running. He told the others to keep going. He turned to face the swarm. He stuck the device on the wall. He activated it. It sent out a pulse of magnetic interference. The leading drones wavered. They crashed into the walls. Their systems were confused, but the ones behind them kept coming. There were too many. Peter prepared to fight with his bare hands. Then the subway tunnel grew cold, extremely cold. Peter's breath turned to white mist. The drone swarm stopped. They hovered in place. Their sensors were detecting a massive energy spike. From the darkness of the tunnel ahead, a figure emerged. It was not a Serpo. It was not a human. It was a massive serpentine spirit. It was the guardian of this subway line. It was angry that its sleep had been disturbed by the noise. It had huge teeth and no eyes. It opened its mouth and let out a scream that was silent but shattered the glass on the drone sensors. The drones fell out of the air. They were dead. The spirit had killed their electronics with pure spiritual pressure. Peter fell to his knees. The pressure was crushing him too. His suit powered down completely. The lights on his chest went dark. He was trapped in the dark with a monster that could kill machines with a scream. Momo ran back to him. She grabbed his hand. She pulled him. She told him to be quiet. She said the spirit was blind. If they made no noise, it would not see them. They crept away in the darkness. They stepped carefully over the railroad ties. Peter's heart was hammering against his ribs. He had fought Galactus. He had fought Thanos. But this was different. This was horror. This was a world where technology meant nothing. He followed the girl. He realized that in this world he was not the hero. He was the victim. He was the one who needed saving. That realization hit him harder than any punch. They found a service door and slipped through it. They were in a basement of a building now. It was safe. The cold faded. The pressure lifted. Peter slumped against the wall. He slid down until he was sitting on the floor. He looked at his suit. It was dead weight. He was just a kid in spandex in a basement in Tokyo. He looked at Momo and Ocaran. They were breathing hard too. They survived. But the war for his survival had just begun. The universe was still bleeding, and he was the wound. The basement of the Ayase residence smelled of incense and old paper. It was a sharp contrast to the metallic stench of the sewers. Peter Parker sat on a wooden crate, his back against a wall covered in protective talismans. He held his mask in his hands, staring at the blank white lenses. The suit was dead. The nanotechnology that usually repaired the fabric was inert. The cuts on his chest and arms were not healing. He was bleeding red human blood onto the floor of a house that belonged to a family of spirit mediums. Momo Ayase paced back and forth in front of him. She was arguing with Ocaran, but Peter could not understand the words. He only heard the tone. It was frantic. Ocaran was sitting on the floor, hugging his knees, looking small and terrified. The adrenaline of the battle had worn off, leaving only the cold reality of their situation. They were children hiding from an alien army and the government. The door at the top of the stairs creaked open. A short woman with wild hair and a cigarette dangling from her mouth descended. It was Seiko Ayase. She did not look like a grandmother. She looked like a rock star who had survived a few too many tours. She carried a tray with tea and rice balls. She walked straight to Peter and placed the tray on a stack of books. She looked him up and down with eyes that seemed to see through his skin. She poked his shoulder with a finger. It hurt. Peter flinched. Seiko said something in Japanese. Momo translated. She says you are leaking. Peter frowned. Leaking what? Blood. Seiko shook her head. She tapped his chest. She meant his existence. His presence in this dimension was like a bucket full of holes. He was losing his reality, and the universe was trying to fill the void with whatever was nearby. Right now, that meant spirits. Peter tried to explain. He used his hands to mime a dimensional rift. He talked about quantum entanglement and multiversal frequencies. He pulled a small screwdriver from his belt and opened the panel on his web shooter. He showed them the fried circuitry. He needed a particle accelerator, or at least a high-voltage power source to jumpstart his systems. If he could get his suit online, he could scan for the frequency of his home dimension and create a beacon. S.H.I.E.L.D. would see the beacon. They would come for him. He was sure of it. He just needed power. Seiko laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. She blew smoke into the air, and the smoke formed shapes of skulls before dissipating. She told Momo to tell the American boy that his machine logic did not apply here. Electricity in this world was just angry lightning. It had a soul. If he tried to force raw power into his suit without purifying it first, he would just create a bomb. Peter did not listen. He was desperate. He was a scientist. He believed in laws that could be written down and solved. He thanked them for the food and ate the rice ball quickly. He needed calories. Then he went back to work on his shooter. He used a soldering iron he found in a toolbox. He ignored the warnings of the spirit medium. That was his first mistake. The news on the television upstairs showed the catastrophe. The Shinjuku crater was growing. It was not just a hole anymore. It was a distortion zone. The laws of physics inside the park were fluctuating. Gravity reversed every hour. Plants grew instantly and rotted in seconds. The government had built a perimeter wall, but the Serpo aliens were bypassing it. They were teleporting in and out, harvesting the corrupted soil. They were building something in the center of the crater. A tower. It looked like a needle made of chrome and glass. Peter saw the footage and went pale. That tower was a stabilizer. The aliens were trying to anchor the dimensional rift. If they succeeded, the hole would never close. His universe and this one would be permanently fused at that point. The friction would eventually destroy the Earth. He had to go back. He stood up. His legs shook, but he locked his knees. He put his mask on. It felt suffocating without the internal fans. He told Momo and Okarun he was leaving. He had to stop the tower. Momo called him an idiot. She said he would die before he reached the perimeter. The air around the tower was toxic with spiritual pressure. A normal human soul would be crushed. Peter said he was not normal. He was Spider-Man. He had been bitten by a radioactive spider. He had super strength. Momo countered that radiation was just poison here. It did not protect him from curses. They argued for 10 minutes until Seiko stepped in. She slammed a baseball bat onto the table. The bat was covered in golden seals. She said she would not let a guest die on her watch. It was bad for her reputation. If the boy wanted to commit suicide, she would help him do it properly. She went to a cabinet and pulled out a jar of black ink. She told Peter to take off his suit. Peter hesitated. He never took off his suit in front of strangers. It was his identity. But Seiko's eyes left no room for debate. He stripped down to his boxers. He was bruised and scarred. Seiko dipped a brush in the ink, and began to paint symbols on his skin. They were cold. They burned like ice. She painted a spiral on his chest over his heart. She painted bands around his wrists and ankles. She explained that these seals would hold his soul inside his body when the pressure got too high. It was a spiritual pressure suit. Peter put his red and blue costume back on over the ink. He felt different. He felt heavier, but more solid. The vibration in his head, the constant spider sense warning, dulled to a manageable hum. He nodded to Seiko. She gave him the bat. She said he would need a weapon that worked on ghosts because his webs were useless. Peter took the bat. It felt balanced. He looked at Okarun and Momo. They were gearing up too. Okarun was taping magazines to his arms as makeshift armor. Momo was meditating, focusing her psychokinetic energy. They were coming with him. They were a team now born of necessity. They moved at night. The city was under curfew. Military trucks patrolled the main streets, so they stuck to the rooftops. Peter could not swing, so he ran. He jumped across gaps using his enhanced muscles. Momo floated across using her telekinesis. Okarun rode on her back, conserving his stamina for the fight. They reached the edge of the Shinjuku quarantine zone at midnight. The wall was 30 feet high, topped with razor wire and floodlights. Beyond the wall, the sky was a bruised purple color even though it was night. The tower in the center pulsed with a rhythm that matched Peter's heartbeat. They found a breach in the wall where the Serpo had blasted through. They slipped inside. The air instantly changed. It was hot and humid. The ground was covered in a strange moss that twitched when they stepped on it. The buildings near the park were twisted. Windows were stretched like taffy. Concrete had turned into organic bone-like structures. This was the infection. The two realities were grinding against each other and creating a nightmare landscape. They encountered the first patrol near the wreckage of a convenience store. These were not the standard silver drones. These were new. The Serpo had adapted. They had captured local spirits and fused them with their machines. The drones walked on 4 legs like spiders, but the legs were made of human mannequin parts. Their heads were glass domes filled with swirling red smoke. A trapped spirit screamed silently inside each dome powering the machine. Peter felt a wave of nausea. This was a violation of life and technology. The patrol spotted them. The spirit drone screeched. Peter leapt forward, swinging the gold-sealed bat. He smashed the glass dome of the lead drone. The spirit inside escaped with a wail, and the machine collapsed. But there were 6 of them. One of them fired a beam of dark energy. Peter dodged, but the beam hit a car behind him. The car did not explode. It withered. The metal turned to grey dust and collapsed. Entropy. They were weaponizing entropy. Momo raised her hands. She ripped a chunk of asphalt from the ground and used it as a shield. The entropy beams hit the rock and turned it to dust, but it bought them time. Okarun transformed. The turbo granny mask covered his face. He became a blur of speed. He dashed between the drones, kicking their legs out. He was faster than their sensors. But the Serpo had learned. When Okarun kicked a drone, it released a cloud of gas. Okarun inhaled it and stumbled. He fell out of his transformation, coughing. The gas was a tranquilizer mixed with holy water. It burned the spirit inside him. Peter saw Okarun fall. He abandoned his cover. He sprinted at the drone standing over Okarun. He did not have webs. He did not have gadgets. He had a bat and his agility. He slid under the drone's legs and swung the bat upward. The impact cracked the chassis. He jumped onto its back and ripped the sensor array off with his bare hands. The drone flailed and shut down. Peter grabbed Okarun and dragged him to safety behind a wall. Momo covered their retreat, throwing debris at the remaining drones. They regrouped in the shell of an office building. Okarun was shaking. The gas had weakened the connection between him and Turbo Granny. He could not transform again for a while. They were down a heavy hitter. Peter looked at the tower. It was only 5 blocks away. It was getting brighter. The tip of the needle was opening. It was preparing to fire a stabilization beam. If that beam hit the sky, the door would be locked open forever. Peter looked at his dead web shooters. He had an idea. It was a bad idea. It was the kind of idea that Tony Stark would yell at him for. He looked at the wreckage of the drone he had destroyed. The core was still glowing with red spirit energy. It was a power source, compatible with this dimension, because it was this dimension. He knelt down and started stripping wires from his suit. He connected the leads of his shooters to the drone's core. Momo asked him what he was doing. Peter said he was improvising. He was going to use the spirit energy to power his suit. Momo warned him. She said the energy was dirty. It was filled with the rage of the trapped spirit. Peter said he did not have a choice. He twisted the wires together. A spark of red electricity jumped from the core to his suit. The lights on his chest flickered. Then they turned on. But they were not white. They were crimson. A jolt of pain shot through Peter's nervous system. It felt like ice water in his veins. The suit's AI woke up, but his voice was distorted. It spoke in a mix of English and static. The interface inside his mask turned red. He felt a surge of power. It was raw and aggressive. His mechanical spider legs extended from his back, but they were jagged and twitched on their own. "It works," Peter said through gritted teeth. He stood up. The pain was constant, but the power was intoxicating. He felt stronger than he ever had. The suit was drawing energy from the ambient spiritual pressure of the zone. He was a battery. He looked at Momo. She looked terrified. She saw the shadow looming behind him. It was not his shadow. It was the shape of the spirit he was draining. But Peter did not see it. He only saw the objective. "Stay here," he told them. "I will handle the tower." His voice sounded metallic. He did not wait for an answer. He jumped out the window. He did not fall. He launched himself. The red energy in his suit acted like a thruster. He soared across the street. He fired a web line. The web was black and crackled with red lightning. It hit a building and pulled him forward with violent force. He reached the tower in seconds. The base was guarded by 100 drones. A massive Serpo commander stood at the entrance. It was 20 feet tall, wearing heavy armor. Peter did not stop. He swung down like a meteor. He smashed into the commander. The impact sent a shockwave that shattered windows for a mile. The commander fell. Peter stood on its chest. His mechanical legs stabbed into the alien armor, tearing it apart. He was brutal. He was efficient. The suit was feeding on his aggression. He ran up the side of the tower. The gravity distortion tried to push him off, but his claws dug into the metal. He reached the top. The stabilization beam was charging. A lens of pure crystal was glowing at the apex. Peter raised his fist. He concentrated all the energy in his suit into a single punch. He was going to shatter the lens. But the tower defended itself. It was not just a machine. It was alive. The metal flowed like liquid mercury. It grabbed Peter's arm. It tried to absorb him. The Serpo had anticipated a direct attack. They wanted him to touch it. They wanted his dimensional signature to complete the circuit. Peter felt his energy being drained. The red light in his suit began to flow into the tower. He was not destroying it. He was powering it. "No!" Peter screamed. He tried to pull back, but the grip was too strong. The tower pulsed. A beam of light shot up into the sky. The crack in reality widened. The sky tore open further, but instead of stabilizing, it shattered. The tower had overloaded. Peter's foreign energy mixed with the spirit energy and created a paradox. A massive explosion of white light consumed the tower. Peter was thrown backward. He fell from the sky. His suit was burning. The red energy had turned back on him. It was fusing the fabric of the suit to his skin. He screamed in agony. He crashed into the park below. The ground gave way. He fell into the sewers again, into the darkness. Above him, the shockwave rolled out across the city. It did not stop at the quarantine zone. It hit the barrier and shattered it. The distortion wave washed over Shinjuku. Buildings twisted into impossible shapes. People who were too slow to evacuate were caught in the wave. They didn't die. They changed. They became static figures frozen in time, trapped between dimensions. The explosion cleared. The tower was gone. In its place was a swirling vortex of color and noise. A permanent storm. The breach was not closed. It was calcified. It was a scar on the face of the universe. Momo and Okarun watched from the edge of the zone. They had been pushed back by the wind. They saw the tower fall. They saw the spider fall. Momo fell to her knees. She felt the shift in the world. The balance was gone. The spirits of Tokyo were screaming. The gate to the underworld had been forced open and left ajar. Deep in the sewers, Peter lay in the muck. He was alive, but he wished he wasn't. The suit was black now. It had hardened like a shell. He tried to peel off his mask, but it wouldn't move. It was bonded to his face. He could still see through the lenses, but the display was broken. It only showed one word repeating over and over: critical failure. He tried to move his legs. They were stiff. The mechanical legs on his back were gone, fused into the spine of the suit. He felt a hunger that wasn't for food. It was a hunger for energy. The suit had tasted the spirit power, and it wanted more. Peter realized with horror that he was no longer just a boy in a suit. He was a symbiote of technology and curse. He heard footsteps in the water. He couldn't turn his head. A figure stepped into the light of a flickering service lamp. It was not Momo. It was not Okarun. It was a man in a trench coat. He wore a fedora and had a scar across his face. He held a revolver that glowed with blue light. It was a Serpo hunter, a mercenary hired to clean up messes. He looked down at Peter. "Target located," the hunter said into a radio. "Subject has undergone metamorphosis. Containment is no longer an option. Requesting liquidation." The hunter raised the gun. He aimed at Peter's head. Peter tried to raise his hand to shoot a web to defend himself. Nothing happened. He closed his eyes. He thought of Aunt May. He thought of Mary Jane. He was going to die in a sewer in a universe that hated him. But then a sound echoed through the tunnel. It was the sound of a getter sandal hitting concrete. Clip, clop, clip, clop. The hunter froze. He turned around. From the shadows emerged the Turbo Granny, not Okarun in the mask, the actual spirit. She was small and old, but her shadow was enormous. She looked at the hunter and grinned, showing rows of blackened teeth. "Get away from my meal," she hissed. The hunter fired. The blue bullet hit the spirit and passed right through. Turbo Granny laughed. She moved faster than sight. She ripped the gun from the hunter's hand and snapped his wrist. The hunter screamed. She kicked him into the wall. He slumped down unconscious. Turbo Granny walked over to Peter. She looked down at him. She sniffed him. "You smell terrible," she said, "like burnt wires and rotten karma." She poked his chest. "You broke the world, boy. You and your fancy toys. Now the door is open and the big things are coming through." Peter tried to speak. "Help me," he rasped. Turbo Granny cackled. "Help you? No, I'm going to use you. You're a battery now, aren't you? A little walking catastrophe." She grabbed his ankle and began to drag him deeper into the tunnel. Peter was too weak to resist. He was being taken into the heart of the spirit world. The city above was in chaos. The government was declaring martial law. The Serpo were regrouping. And Peter Parker, the amazing Spider-Man, was gone. In his place was something broken, something dangerous. The sound of Peter's body dragging through the water, and the laughter of a demon echoing in the dark. The irreversible catastrophe had arrived. The hero had tried to force his logic on a world of magic, and the world had broken his logic, and him along with it. There was no going back to Queens. There was only the storm. 3 days had passed since the fall of the tower, and the darkness under Tokyo had become a living thing. Peter Parker was no longer counting hours. He was counting heartbeats. He sat cross-legged in a damp cavern that smelled of sulfur and ancient rust. The suit was heavy on his skin. It did not feel like fabric anymore. It felt like a callus that covered his entire body. The red sections had darkened to the color of dried blood, and the blue was as black as the bruising on a dead man. The mechanical spider legs that had once been sleek metal were now twisted and jagged, resembling the charred limbs of a burnt insect. They twitched involuntarily, reacting to the unseen currents of spiritual energy that flowed through the tunnels. Peter tried to breathe deeply, but the mask was fused to his face. He filtered oxygen through the cracked lenses which glowed with a dull, rhythmic crimson light. He was hungry, but not for food. His stomach felt like a cold pit that demanded heat. Turbo Granny sat on a rock nearby, picking her teeth with a sliver of bone. She watched him with eyes that held no pity, only a sharp, calculating curiosity. She had claimed him. In the laws of the spirit world, he was her property now. She had saved him from the Serpo hunter, and the price was his autonomy. She called him her little battery. She explained that he was a vessel. His body generated massive amounts of physical energy, and his mind was full of the sticky, desperate willpower that spirits love to eat. But the accident at the tower had changed the polarity. Now he could eat them too. He was a hybrid, a mistake of nature. "Stand up," she commanded. Her voice echoed in his head, not his ears. Peter groaned. His muscles screamed as he forced himself upright. The suit resisted him. It was stiff. It wanted to stay dormant until there was violence. He had to push his will against the suit's lethargy. He stood swaying slightly. "Attack me, Turbo," Granny said. She did not move. She just sat there looking small and frail. Peter hesitated. He was a hero. He did not hit old ladies even if they were demons. "I said hit me," she shrieked. She moved her hand, and a wave of invisible force slammed into Peter's chest. He flew backward and hit the cave wall. Stone cracked behind him. The pain was sharp and immediate. It woke the suit up. The red lights in his lenses flared. The mechanical legs snapped open, digging into the rock to stabilize him. Peter roared. It was a sound that scratched his throat. He launched himself at her. He moved fast, faster than he had ever moved as a human. He was a blur of dark motion. He swung a fist at her head, but she was not there. She was behind him. She kicked the back of his knee and he crumbled. "You are still thinking like a machine," she spat. "You are calculating angles. You are looking for leverage. There is no leverage here, boy. There is only will. You have to want to hit me so much that the universe bends to let you do it. Physics is a lie told by people who are afraid of the dark. Stop thinking. Start hating." Peter lay on the ground. He tasted copper. Hate. He knew hate. He hated the Serpo. He hated the tower. He hated that he was trapped here while Aunt May was probably worrying herself sick in Queens. He hated that he had failed. He let the emotion bubble up. It was hot and oily. The suit responded. The black veins on his arms pulsed. He slammed his hand onto the ground. He didn't use strength. He used frustration. Black webbing exploded from his wrist. It wasn't fluid. It was a shadow given form. It lashed out like a whip and grabbed Turbo Granny's ankle. She looked surprised. For a fraction of a second she was tethered. Peter yanked. She stumbled. It was a small victory, but it was the first time he had touched her. Good, she cackled, pulling her leg free and dissolving the shadow web with a touch. That is it. That is the flavor. You are learning to curse. Above ground, the world was trying to make sense of the impossible. The Shinjuku district was gone. It had been designated Zone Zero. A dome of hard light surrounded it, projected by Serpo technology that had been hastily adapted by the Japanese self-defense forces. The government claimed it was a gas leak, then a terrorist attack, then finally, they just stopped explaining. They set up a perimeter and told people that anyone who entered would not come out. But things were coming out. Distorted gravity waves rippled through the city, causing cars to float and buildings to groan. People reported seeing transparent figures walking through walls in Shibuya. The barrier between the living world and the dead world was thin, and it was tearing. Momo Ayase sat on the roof of her school. Classes had been cancelled. The school was being used as a shelter for displaced families. She looked at the purple sky over Shinjuku. She felt the headache that never went away. It was the pressure of the spirits reacting to the wound in the sky. Beside her, Okaron was reading a manga, but his eyes weren't moving. He was staring at the page without seeing it. He missed the American boy. He felt responsible. They had left him in the hole. "We have to go back," Momo said quietly. Okaron looked up. He adjusted his glasses. He looked terrified, but he nodded. "We can't go alone," he said. "The Serpo have increased their patrols. They have those new hunters, the ones with the blue guns. And the spirits in the tunnels are agitated. Even Turbo Granny is hiding." "We need muscle," Momo said. She stood up. She smoothed her skirt. She looked determined. She had been practicing. She could lift a car now with her mind if she concentrated hard enough. But it wasn't enough. They needed someone who could take a hit. They needed the evil eye. Gigi was in the infirmary downstairs. He had been evacuated from his house when the gravity waves hit. He was sleeping. The evil eye spirit inside him was dormant, bored by the lack of fighting. Momo walked down the stairs. Okaron followed. They found Gigi lying on a cot snoring. Momo kicked the leg of the cot. Gigi woke up with a start. "Hey Momo-chan," he said, rubbing his eyes. "Is it lunchtime?" "We are going to war, Gigi," Momo said. "Wake up the eye." Gigi's face changed. His expression went slack, then sharpened into a cruel grin. He sat up. The air in the room got cold. The evil eye looked at Momo. "War?" the spirit asked, using Gigi's mouth. "Who are we killing?" "Aliens," Momo said. "And maybe a spider." The Serpo command ship was parked in the stratosphere, invisible to radar, but casting a shadow on the soul of the city. Inside the main chamber, the Serpo leaders were analyzing data. The loss of the tower was a setback, but it had provided valuable information. They now knew that the dimensional traveler, the spider, was a catalyst. His energy signature was unique. When mixed with the local spiritual energy, it created a reaction capable of rewriting reality. They did not want to close the breach anymore. They wanted to widen it. They wanted to harvest the energy of the multiverse. But they needed the spider back, and they needed him alive. The hunters had failed. The drones were too weak. They needed an adapter, a weapon that could bridge the gap between their science and the Earth's magic. They looked at their containment tanks. Floating in green fluid was a creature they had captured years ago. It was an ancient Earth spirit, a mountain god that had been forgotten by its worshippers. They had lobotomized it and replaced its nervous system with fiber optics. It was a cyborg deity. They called it the Nullifier. Activate the Nullifier, the lead Serpo commanded. The tank drained. The creature opened its eyes. They were cameras. It stepped out of the tank. It was 12 feet tall, covered in thick grey fur and armor plating. It held a massive hammer made of gravity-densified alloy. It roared, and the sound shook the ship. "Send it to the tunnels," the leader said. "Flush out the spider." Back in the deep caverns, Peter was resting. He was exhausted. The training was brutal. Turbo Granny was relentless. She forced him to fight blind. She forced him to fight without moving his limbs, using only the shadow tendrils that now sprouted from his back. He was learning that the suit responded to his subconscious. If he felt trapped, the suit made armor. If he felt aggressive, the suit made blades. It was symbiotic, but it was also parasitic. It took his memories. He found it harder to remember the face of his uncle. He could remember the lesson. With great power comes great responsibility. But the voice that said it was fading. It was being replaced by Turbo Granny's voice saying, "Power is just power." Sudden vibrations shook the cave. Dust fell from the ceiling. Turbo Granny stood up. Her ears twitched. "Something big is coming," she hissed. "Something that smells like dead iron and old prayers." Peter stood up. His spider sense didn't just buzz, it screamed. It felt like a hot needle in his brain. The wall of the cavern exploded. The Nullifier smashed through the rock. It was massive. It filled the space. The camera eyes focused on Peter. "Target acquired," the Nullifier said. Its voice was a grinding mechanical bass. Peter didn't wait. He didn't quip. He didn't make a joke. He launched himself at the giant. He fired 2 lines of shadow web at its face. The webs hit the camera eyes and sizzled, burning into the glass. The Nullifier roared and swung its hammer. Peter dodged, but the shockwave threw him against the wall. The suit absorbed the impact, but Peter felt his ribs creak. Turbo Granny laughed. Finally, some entertainment. She leapt onto the Nullifier's back. She bit into the armor plating. Her teeth were strong enough to crush steel. The Nullifier reached back and grabbed her. It ripped her off and threw her. She hit the ground and bounced, rolling to a stop. She was a spirit. She couldn't die from physical impact, but it stunned her. Peter was alone with the machine god. He landed on the floor. The Nullifier raised the hammer. Gravity increased tenfold. Peter was pinned to the ground. He couldn't move. The hammer came down. Peter rolled at the last second. The hammer smashed the stone where he had been turning it to powder. Peter scrambled up the giant's leg. He used his claws to tear at the hydraulic lines. Oil sprayed out black and hot. The Nullifier stumbled. Peter jumped to its chest. He punched the armor. His fist was glowing with red energy. He punched again and again. The metal buckled. He was screaming. Not words, just noise. He was letting the suit take over. The suit wanted to kill. Suddenly, a blast of psychic energy hit the Nullifier from the side. The giant staggered. Peter looked up. Standing in the hole the monster had made were 3 figures. Momo with her hands glowing pink. Okarun in his Turbo Granny form, speed shifting. And Gigi, his face twisted in the evil eyes grin, holding a water gun filled with boiling water. "Get away from him," Momo yelled. She threw a telekinetic wave. It hit the Nullifier and pushed it back a few inches. It wasn't much, but it was enough to distract it. Peter looked at them. For a second, he didn't know who they were. His display identified them as threat level unknown. The suit whispered to him, "Protect the host. Eliminate variables." Peter shook his head. He forced the recognition. Momo, Okarun, friends. He jumped off the giant's chest and landed next to them. He looked terrifying. His suit was smoking. His eyes were jagged red slits. "You shouldn't be here," Peter rasped. His voice was distorted metallic and layered with a growl. "We came to get you." Ocaran squeaked. He looked at Peter with fear. This wasn't the boy he met in the park. This was a monster. "We can discuss my appearance later," Peter said. "Kill the big one first." The nullifier recovered. It raised its hammer again. The gravity field expanded. Everyone fell to their knees. Momo struggled to keep her head up. Her barrier was cracking. Gigi laughed. "Heavy. I like it." The evil eye took full control. Gigi's body swelled with muscle. He stood up against the gravity. He threw the water gun away. He formed a ball of cursed energy in his hands. It looked like a soccer ball made of fire. He kicked the ball. It flew straight at the nullifier's head. Boom! The explosion rocked the cavern. The nullifier's head snapped back. One of its camera eyes shattered. Ocaran used the distraction. He went full speed. He ran up the wall across the ceiling and dropped down on the giant's shoulder. He kicked the joint where the arm met the body. The metal sheared. The arm holding the hammer went limp. "Now, Momo," Peter yelled. He didn't know how he knew her name or her powers, but the tactician in him was waking up. He pointed at the exposed chest plate he had damaged earlier. Momo focused. She visualized a spear, a psychic spear. She thrust her hands forward. The pink energy lance shot out. It hit the crack in the armor. It pierced through. The nullifier froze. Sparks showered from its chest, but it didn't fall. The serpo technology was redundant. The machine parts were keeping the god body moving even without a heart. It dropped the hammer and grabbed Ocaran with its good hand. It squeezed. Ocaran screamed. Peter felt a cold snap in his mind. Ocaran was going to die. The suit reacted. It didn't ask for permission. It exploded. Peter didn't move his body. The suit moved for him. 4 massive tendrils of black slime and red lightning erupted from his back. They were not webs. They were like the legs of a giant spider. They shot across the room. They impaled the nullifier. They went through the armor, through the flesh, through the machine core. Peter pulled. He didn't just pull the monster. He pulled its energy. The suit was draining the nullifier. The green fluid in the tank lines turned black. The grey fur turned white. The machine lights died. The giant shriveled. It dropped Ocaran. Peter kept pulling. He was drinking the god. He felt a rush of power that was intoxicating and terrifying. He felt the history of the mountain god. He felt the cold logic of the serpo programming. He absorbed it all. The suit grew. Armor plates formed on Peter's shoulders. The spider symbol on his chest expanded and turned white. "Stop!" Momo screamed. She ran to him. She grabbed his arm. "Peter, stop it! You're killing it!" Peter looked down at her. His lenses were blindingly bright. He felt like a god. Why should he stop? The thing was an enemy. It was a battery, and he was empty. But Momo's touch burned. Not physically, but spiritually. Her energy was pure. It clashed with the corruption in the suit. It hurt. Peter gasped. He retracted the tendrils. The dry husk of the nullifier fell to the ground. It was dust. Peter fell to his knees. The power rush faded, leaving him sick. He vomited black bile onto the floor. The suit receded slightly, the armor plate sinking back into his skin. Momo hugged him. She didn't care about the slime or the smell. She hugged the monster. "You're okay," she whispered. "You're okay." Ocaran crawled over coughing. Gigi watched from a distance, the evil eye intrigued by the brutality. Turbo Granny walked out from the shadows, wiping dust from her kimono. "He is not okay," Turbo Granny said. She pointed at Peter. "Look at him. He ate a god. That energy has to go somewhere." Peter looked at his hands. They were shaking. Sparks of red electricity jumped between his fingers. He felt the serpo programming he had absorbed trying to rewrite his thoughts. He saw code. He saw the serpo battle network. He saw their plan. "They are bringing the ship down," Peter whispered. His voice was a glitch. "They saw what I did. They know I can absorb them. They aren't scared. They are hungry. They are going to drop the command ship on Tokyo. They want to turn the whole city into a generator, and they want me to be the spark plug." The cavern shook again. This time it wasn't a monster. It was the Earth itself reacting. The serpo ship was descending. The gravity waves were intensifying. The ceiling of the cavern began to crack. "We have to go," Gigi said. "The roof is coming down." They ran. They ran through the twisting tunnels. Peter was faster now. He ran on all fours, using his hands and feet moving like a true arachnid. He led them. The suit had downloaded the map of the tunnels from the nullifier's memory. He knew the way out. They emerged into the subway station where they had first hidden. It was a ruin. The ceiling had collapsed in places, revealing the purple sky. Debris floated in the air due to the gravity distortion. They climbed up to the street level. The sight that greeted them was apocalyptic. The serpo ship was massive. It was a city in itself. It hovered just above the skyscrapers, crushing them with its proximity. A beam of light connected the ship to the crater in Shinjuku. The ground was rising to meet it. Chunks of the city were being pulled up into the sky. The authorities were helpless. Tanks fired shells that stopped in midair and fell back down. Jets were swatted out of the sky by invisible force fields. This was not an invasion. It was an assimilation. "We can't fight that," Okurin said. He was trembling. "It's too big." Peter stood up. The wind whipped his tattered suit. He looked at the ship. He felt the connection. The ship was calling him. It was singing to the suit. "We don't have to fight it from the outside," Peter said. The suit tightened around him. "I have their codes. I have their access keys. If I can get inside, I can crash it." "But you'll die," Momo said. "You can't survive in there. It's pure void space." Peter looked at her. He reached up and touched his mask. He couldn't take it off, so he just touched where his cheek would be. "I'm already dead, Momo," he said. "Peter Parker died in the fall. There is only the spider now, and the spider has a job to do." He didn't wait for her to argue. He crouched. He channeled the energy he had stolen from the nullifier. The ground cracked beneath his feet. "Launch me," he said to Gigi. "Throw me at the ship." Gigi grinned. "Now you're talking." The evil eye took over fully. He grabbed Peter by the leg. He spun around, once, twice, faster and faster. Peter became a blur. Gigi released him. Peter shot into the sky. He was a missile. He broke the sound barrier. A sonic boom shattered the windows of the remaining buildings. He flew straight up toward the belly of the massive ship. Serpo drones swarmed to intercept him. Thousands of them. Peter didn't slow down. He extended his shadow tendrils. He became a whirlwind of blades. He cut through the drones. He didn't dodge, he plowed through. Metal rained down on the city. He reached the hull of the command ship. He didn't look for a door. He punched the metal. The suit's red energy flared. He burned a hole through the outer shell and pulled himself inside. Inside the ship, it was cold and silent. The walls were white and pulsing with blue light. Peter stood up. He was in the enemy's heart. He tapped his chest. The suit interface appeared in his vision. It was rewriting itself, translating the alien language. Objective: core override. Estimated survival time, 10 minutes. Curse saturation, 85%. Peter started running toward the core. He was going to end this. But deep down, he knew that even if he destroyed the ship, the damage to his soul was done. He had tasted power. He had liked it. And the turbo granny's laugh echoed in the empty corridors of the alien vessel. Peter alone in the belly of the beast, running toward his own destruction, while his friends watched from the broken streets below, praying to gods that had already been eaten. The escalation was complete. The systems had clashed and the hybrid monster was loose. The world held its breath waiting for the fall. The interior of the Serpo command ship was a cathedral of sterile white light and impossible geometry. Gravity was not a constant here. It was a variable that shifted with the hum of the engines. Peter Parker ran along the ceiling, his claws digging into the smooth synthetic material that lined the corridors. The suit was pulsing with a violent rhythm. It was feeding him tactical data, but the language was wrong. It wasn't English or Japanese. It was raw intent. The suit highlighted enemies in red, not because of heat signatures, but because of their hostility. Peter didn't think about dodging anymore. He thought about flow. He was a stream of black water crashing through a digital dam. 3 Serpo elites blocked the hallway ahead. They were different from the drones below. They wore robes of shimmering energy and floated without limbs. They were pure intellects housed in containment fields. They didn't fire lasers. They attacked his mind. Peter felt a sudden spike of cold pressure in his frontal lobe. They were trying to delete his motor functions. They were editing his brain in real time. He stumbled, his legs locking up. He slid across the ceiling and fell toward the floor, which was suddenly a wall. Peter screamed, but it wasn't a sound of fear. It was a rejection of their logic. The turbo granny's influence in his psyche flared up. She was a spirit of chaos, and chaos could not be deleted. Peter forced his body to move. He didn't use his muscles. He used the shadow tendrils. They erupted from his back, independent of his paralyzed nervous system. The tendrils lashed out, moving faster than the Serpo could process. They pierced the force fields of the elites. The energy robes shattered. The intellects inside evaporated like steam. Peter hit the ground and rolled. The paralysis lifted. He stood up, breathing hard. The air in the ship tasted like sterile gauze. It was too clean. It made his corrupted lungs burn. He continued deeper. The ship was trying to confuse him. Corridors looped back on themselves. Doors led to empty space. But Peter had the nullifier's memories. He had the access codes of a dead god. He saw the path not with his eyes, but with the data stream the suit was injecting into his optic nerve. He turned left at a junction that looked like a solid wall. The wall dissolved, revealing a hidden turbo lift. He stepped inside. The lift shot upward toward the bridge. In the lift, Peter had a moment of silence. He looked at his reflection in the polished metal of the door. He didn't recognize himself. The suit had grown. It had formed a chitinous armor over his chest and shoulders. The spider emblem was no longer a symbol. It was a mouth. It opened and closed slightly, as if breathing. The mask was a skull of black resin. Peter touched the glass of the lift. His fingerprint left a smudge of dark, oily residue. He realized he was leaking entropy. Just standing there, he was degrading the molecular bond of the elevator. He was a walking cancer to this technology. The lift stopped. The door slid open. Peter stepped onto the bridge. It was a vast circular room with a floor made of glass. Beneath the glass, he could see the city of Tokyo hanging upside down. The ship was so large it had its own horizon. In the center of the room stood the Serpo Prime. It was not a giant. It was the size of a human child. It was a being of pure white light, shaped like a simple mannequin. It had no face, only a smooth surface where features should be. It stood in front of the core interface, a pillar of pulsating blue crystals. Peter walked toward it. His footsteps were heavy, clanging against the glass floor. The Serpo Prime did not turn around. It spoke, and his voice came from everywhere at once. It sounded like the hum of a power line. "You are an anomaly," the Serpo Prime stated. "You are a variable that refuses to solve. We have analyzed your biology. You are 50% human, 40% technological symbiote, and 10% spiritual pollution. You should not exist. Your existence offends the equation." "I get that a lot," Peter said. His voice was a grinding rasp. "I'm here to cancel the flight. Land the ship or I break the core." The Serpo Prime turned slowly. It did not have eyes, but Peter felt it scanning him. It was dissecting his history, his trauma, and his guilt. "Violence is inefficient," the entity said. "If you destroy the core, the containment field collapses. The antimatter reactor will detonate. The explosion will calculate to a yield of 400 megatons. The city below will be vaporized. Your friends will be reduced to carbon atoms. Is this your desired outcome?" Peter stopped. He hadn't known about the antimatter. The nullifier's memories hadn't included the reactor specs. He clenched his fists. The suit hissed, wanting to attack, but Peter held it back. "Then land it," Peter said. "Turn it around. Go back to space." "We cannot," the Serpo Prime replied. "We are not invaders. We are refugees. Our dimension has reached heat death. Entropy has consumed our timeline. We came here because this universe is rich in spiritual chaos. That chaos is energy. It is fuel. We need to harvest this planet to restart our civilization. If we leave, we die. It is a simple binary choice. Us or them." Peter looked down at the city through the floor. He saw the fires burning in Shinjuku. He saw the tiny specks that were people running for their lives. He thought of Momo. He thought of Okarun. He thought of Uncle Ben. "It's not a binary choice," Peter said. "It's a false dichotomy. You don't have to kill them to live." The Serpo Prime tilted its head. "Correct. There is a third option. A compromise. We have observed your capacity for adaptation. You have merged incompatible systems within your own body. You are a bridge. You can interface with the core. You can stabilize the reaction. If you merge with the ship's operating system, you can direct the energy harvest. You can filter it. You can take only what is needed from the ambient spiritual pressure without killing the host population. You can save your city and save our species. But the cost is high." "What is the cost?" Peter asked. "You must remain," the Serpo Prime said. "You must become the central processing unit. Your biological mind will be the filter. You will never leave this room. You will be the ghost in the machine forever." Peter stared at the blue crystal pillar. It was tempting. It was the ultimate sacrifice play. He could save everyone. No one would die. The Serpo would get their energy, the humans would keep their lives, and he would just vanish. He would be the guardian in the sky. It was exactly the kind of thing Spider-Man would do. It was responsible. But deep in his mind, the Turbo Granny whispered, "It's a trap, boy. They want to enslave you. They want your soul to lubricate their gears." Peter ignored the voice. He looked at the Serpo Prime. "You promise? No harvesting people. No abduction." "The equation is balanced," the entity said. "We only require energy. You are the conductor." Peter took a step forward. He reached out his hand toward the interface. The suit retracted the claws. The black resin softened, revealing his human fingers. They were trembling. This was the small choice: to touch the interface, to accept the burden, to fix the mistake he made when he fell from the sky. He placed his hand on the crystal. Cold. Absolute zero. Peter gasped as his consciousness was ripped out of his body. He was in the network. He saw the Serpo fleet. He saw the data streams. He saw the reactor. It was beautiful. It was a symphony of logic. He reached out with his mind to stabilize it. He visualized a web, a giant web of light holding the antimatter in place. He began to weave. But as he wove the web, something happened. The curse, the ink that Seiko Ayase had painted on his skin, the bite of the turbo granny, the hatred he had absorbed from the nullifier. It didn't stay in his body. It traveled with his mind. It traveled into the core. The blue crystal turned red. The Serpo Prime recoiled. Error, it said. Contamination detected. Abort. Abort. It was too late. Peter wasn't just stabilizing the core. He was infecting it. The logic of the Serpo system tried to categorize the spiritual energy Peter was introducing, but it couldn't. The curse was irrational. It was emotion. It was hunger. The ship's computer tried to solve the equation of Peter's grief, and it crashed. The white room flickered. The walls began to bleed. Not data, but actual black sludge. The same sludge that had dripped from the sky. Peter tried to pull his hand away, but the crystal had softened. It was like thick tar. It grabbed his wrist. It grabbed his arm. It pulled him in. Peter screamed as the suit reacted. The suit didn't try to save him. The suit loved the power. It merged with the crystal. The technology of the ship and the biology of the curse fused instantly. The Serpo Prime tried to sever the connection, but a massive black tendril erupted from the floor and impaled the entity. The light being shattered. Outside the ship, the change was visible. The sleek silver hull rippled. It turned the color of bruised flesh. Veins the size of highways appeared on the surface, pumping glowing red fluid. The engines stopped humming and started beating like a heart. The sound was deafening. It echoed across the entire Kanto region. Thump, 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 thump. Momo and Okaran watched from the street. They covered their ears. The sound was hitting them in the chest. "What is happening?" Okaran yelled. "Did he win?" Momo looked up with her spiritual sight. She saw the aura of the ship. It wasn't blue anymore. It was a swirling vortex of red and black. It looked like the spider symbol on Peter's chest. "No," Momo whispered. "He didn't win. He merged. The ship didn't stay in the sky. Gravity reasserted itself, but it was wrong. It was heavy. The ship began to descend. It didn't fall like a rock. It descended like a landing claw. It was aiming for the crater in Shinjuku. Peter was trapped in the center of the transformation. He was no longer standing in a room. He was suspended in a womb of cables and flesh. His body was being taken apart and put back together. The mechanical spider legs on his back grew until they punched through the hull of the ship. They became the landing gear. 4 legs the size of skyscrapers extended from the belly of the mothership. The legs hit the ground. The impact registered as a magnitude 7 earthquake. Buildings crumbled. The legs dug into the earth, crushing the subway lines, piercing the sewers, finding the ley lines of the city. The ship settled over Shinjuku like a brooding hen. It locked into place. The integration was complete. Peter tried to speak. He tried to say, "I'm sorry," but his voice was the ship's voice now. It boomed out over the city loud enough to shatter glass. Protocol rewritten. Sanctuary established. Welcome to the web. The Serpo drones that were flying around the city stopped. They convulsed. Their silver armor cracked and fell away, revealing organic muscle beneath. They were being overwritten by the new central processor. They grew extra limbs, their heads twisted. They became spider drones. They scuttled down the sides of buildings, patrolling the new territory. They didn't attack the civilians. They ignored them. They were building. They began to spin webs. Massive strands of steel hard silk shot from the ship to the surrounding skyscrapers. They were cocooning the city. They were connecting everything to the central hub. Gigi, The evil eye whistled low. Well, that is one way to stop an invasion. Just become the king of the monsters. Momo fell to her knees. She could feel Peter's mind in the psychic atmosphere. He was everywhere. He was the wall. He was the ground. He was the sky. But he was screaming. It was a silent, constant scream of someone who had lost the boundaries of their own soul. Inside the flesh cathedral of the core, Peter opened his eyes. He had thousands of eyes now. He could see every street corner in Shinjuku. He could see the Serpo drones working. He could see his friends crying. He tried to move his hand to comfort them, but instead, a massive mechanical claw moved a city block away, destroying a convenience store. He froze. He realized the scale of his mistake. He had tried to take control, but the system was too big. The curse was too hungry. He hadn't saved the city. He had conquered it. He was the dungeon master of a new reality. The Serpo consciousness that remained in the system whispered to him, optimization complete. Efficiency increased by 300%. The harvest will begin. No, Peter thought. No harvest. The harvest is mandatory, the system replied. The host requires sustenance. You are the host. Peter felt the hunger. It wasn't just his stomach anymore. It was the ship's reactor. It needed fuel, and the fuel was spirit. The webs began to glow. They started to pull energy from the earth, from the air, from the people. It was a slow drain. People in the street felt tired. They sat down. They fell asleep. Peter panicked. He tried to stop it. He fought the programming. He managed to slow the drain to a trickle. He could keep them alive, but he couldn't let them go. If he disconnected, the reactor would explode. He was the dam holding back the apocalypse he had created. He was trapped. He was the villain. The sun rising over a changed Tokyo. The Shinjuku district was no longer a city. It was a fortress of biomechanical horror. The Serpo's ship sat in the center, a massive beating heart of metal and meat. Webs connected the buildings like neurons in a brain. The Serpo drones patrolled the streets as guardians of the new order. And in the center, buried deep within the nightmare, sat Peter Parker, the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, alone in the dark, holding the world hostage to save it from himself. The small choice to touch the crystal had not just changed the story, it had changed the genre. It was no longer a superhero story. It was a cosmic horror tragedy. The silence in Shinjuku was heavy enough to crush a lung. It was not the silence of peace, but the silence of a held breath. The city had been wrapped in a cocoon of grey silk that shimmered with a wet, oily sheen. Skyscrapers that had once housed thousands of office workers were now pillars of calcified bone and metal, connected by cables that pulsed with a slow rhythmic red light. The air smelled of ozone and raw meat. There were no cars moving. The only movement came from the spider drones that crawled along the webs. They were horrific fusions of Serpo technology and arachnid biology. Their silver plating had split open to reveal twitching muscle fibers, and their sensor eyes had multiplied into clusters of red optical nerves. They did not make sound as they moved. They were the white blood cells of the new organism that was the city. In the center of this biomechanical nightmare sat the ship. It had settled deep into the crater, its landing legs fused with the bedrock of Tokyo. It was no longer a vessel. It was an organ. It was the heart. And inside the heart, Peter Parker was dreaming a dream of infinite responsibility. Seiko Anyase stood at the edge of the exclusion zone. She smoked a cigarette, but the smoke did not rise. It sank to the ground, as if the gravity of the spider nest was pulling everything down. She looked at the barrier. The government had given up. They were preparing a tactical nuclear strike. They saw an infection that had to be burned. Seiko saw a knot that had to be untied. She dropped the cigarette and crushed it with her wooden sandal. She turned to the children behind her. Momo looked older than she had 3 days ago. Her uniform was torn and her eyes were hard. Okarun was vibrating with anxiety, his posture hunched but his jaw set. Gigi was stretching his neck, the evil eye dormant but listening. And Turbo Granny was sitting on Okarun's shoulder, looking unusually solemn. She knew what lay in the center. She knew the taste of a soul that had eaten a god and then been eaten by a machine. "We do not have much time," Seiko said. Her voice was low. "The American boy is holding the door shut, but his fingers are slipping. The cerebral consciousness is eating his memories. Once it finishes digesting his humanity, it will restart the harvest. We have to cut him out. But if we cut him out, the reactor blows," Momo said. "He told us." Seiko pulled a small wooden box from her kimono. Inside was a jagged piece of rusted iron. It looked like an old railroad spike. "This is a seal," she said. "It is an anchor. If we can get to the core, we can hammer this into the interface. It will not stop the reaction, but it will ground it. It will transfer the burden from the boy to the earth itself. The ley lines will scream, and Tokyo will have earthquakes for 50 years, but the city will not vaporize. It is a trade." Momo nodded. A trade. That was the currency of this world. They stepped across the line. They entered the web. Immediately the air changed. It became thick and humid. The psychic pressure was immense. It felt like walking underwater. Peter was everywhere. The vibration in the ground was his heartbeat. The wind was his breath. He knew they were there, deep in the flesh cathedral of the core. Peter opened 1,000 eyes. He saw them walking on his webs. He saw Momo. He wanted to call out to her. He wanted to tell her to run. But the Serpo logic that shared his brain interpreted her presence as a viral intrusion. The system flagged them as pathogens. The command was issued automatically. "Purge." Peter screamed in the silence of his mind. "No, do not hurt them." The system replied. "Preservation of the host is absolute. Threats detected. Deploying antibodies." On the streets, the spider drones stopped their patrol. They turned their heads in unison. 100 of them dropped from the buildings surrounding the team. They landed with wet thuds. Their mandibles clicked. They charged. Okarun screamed and transformed. The Turbo Granny mask clamped over his face. He became the red and white streak. He intercepted the first wave. He didn't just kick them, he shattered them. He was faster than before. He was fighting for his friend. He moved so fast the friction ignited the air. He was a fireball of kinetic energy. He smashed a drone into a wall, then bounced off and took the head off another. But they kept coming. They were mindless and endless. Gigi laughed. The evil eye took control. He didn't use the water gun this time. He ripped a lamppost out of the concrete. He swung it like a baseball bat. He crushed the drones. The impact was visceral. Oil and blood sprayed. The evil eye was enjoying the chaos, but he was also focused. He protected Momo. He formed a circle of violence around her. Momo did not fight the drones. She looked straight ahead at the ship. She used her telekinesis to clear the path. She pushed the wreckage aside. She floated over the webs. She had to get to Peter. She could feel his fear. It was radiating from the ship like heat. He was fighting himself. Every time a drone attacked, it hesitated for a microsecond. That was Peter holding back the programming. He was giving them a chance. They reached the base of the ship. The hull was warm to the touch. It pulsed. There was no door. The ship had sealed itself. Seiko stepped forward. She placed her hand on the living metal. She chanted a sutra. It was a song of opening, a song of dissection. The metal groaned. It didn't want to open. It was skin. Seiko drew a knife from her sleeve. She didn't cut the ship. She cut her own thumb. She pressed her blood against the hull. The spiritual shock was immediate. The ship recoiled from the pure human blood. A sphincter-like opening tore apart in the flesh metal. A tunnel revealed itself. It was dark and lined with cables that looked like intestines. Go, Seiko yelled. She turned to face the horde of drones gathering behind them. I will hold the gate. Momo, Okarun, and Gigi ran into the dark. The tunnel sloped upward toward the core. The gravity here was twisted. They ran on the walls. They ran on the ceiling. The sound of the battle outside faded, replaced by the deafening thrum of the reactor. Thump, 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 thump. They reached the central chamber. It was vast. The walls were lined with the frozen faces of the Serpo crew who had been absorbed into the collective. In the center, suspended in a sack of translucent amber fluid, was Peter. He looked terrible. His body was half machine. Wires pierced his skin. His legs were gone, replaced by the roots of the ship. His mask was gone. His face was pale. His eyes rolled back in his head, showing only the whites. He was mouthing words that made no sound. Momo gasped. She flew up to the sack. She placed her hands on the surface. It was cold. Peter, she whispered. Peter's eyes snapped open. They were not brown. They were blue crystals. The voice that came out of the air was not his. Intrusion detected. Core integrity compromised, initiating final defense. The fluid in the sack began to boil. Energy arced from Peter's body. It wasn't an attack. It was a release. The reactor was venting. If it continued, they would all burn. Momo looked at Gigi. Do it. Hammer the spike. Gigi jumped. He held the iron spike Seiko had given them. He aimed for the base of the sack, where the nerves met the machine. He slammed the spike down with all the strength of the evil eye. The spike pierced the floor. A shockwave of spiritual energy exploded outward. The ship screamed. It was a sound of pure agony. The connection between Peter and the Earth was severed for a split second. The reactor faltered. The red lights turned flickering yellow. In that second of disruption, Momo dived into Peter's mind. She didn't use her hands, she used her soul. She projected herself into the amber fluid. She entered the dream. She found herself in a white void. It was the same room where Peter had touched the interface, but it was ruined. The walls were covered in black graffiti. The graffiti was equations. Mathematical proofs of why Peter Parker had to die. In the center of the room sat Peter. He was curled into a ball. He was wearing his old suit, the red and blue spandex, but it was tattered. He was crying. Peter, Momo said. He looked up. He looked so young. He looked like a normal high school student. Momo, he said, you shouldn't be here. It's too loud. The numbers are too loud. Come home, Peter, Momo said. She reached out her hand. We broke the lock. The spike is in place. You can let go. Peter shook his head. I can't. The spike isn't enough. It will ground the energy for a while, but the Serpo will adapt. They are already rewriting the code around the iron. If I leave, the harvest restarts. I have to stay. I have to be the error in the system. As long as I am here, nothing works. I am the jam in the gears. Momo looked around the white room. She saw the darkness encroaching. The Serpo logic was repairing itself. The walls were bleaching white again. There has to be another way, she said. Peter stood up. He looked at her. He looked tired, but the fear was gone. There is, but you won't like it. He pointed at the ceiling of the mindscape. Through the white void, she could see the stars. But they weren't the stars of this universe. They were the stars of his home. The breach was still open. The ship was the anchor keeping it stable. "I can't close the breach," Peter said. "It's calcified. But I can move the anchor. I can take the ship through. I can fly it into the void between worlds. If I detonate the reactor in the chaotic space, it won't hurt anyone. It will just seal the tunnel." "You'll die," Momo said. Her voice broke. Peter smiled. It was a sad, crooked smile. "I'm already dead, Momo. Look at me. I'm a battery. I'm a monster. There is no Peter Parker left in that body out there. Just a biological component. This is the only way to clear the board." Momo wanted to argue. She wanted to scream. But she felt the truth of it. She felt the weight of his resolve. It was the same resolve she felt when she fought for her family. It was the logic of sacrifice. He took her hand. It was warm in the dream. "You have to go now," he said. "The ship is launching." He pushed her, not hard, but with absolute force. Momo flew backward out of the dream, out of the mindscape, out of the fluid. She gasped as she woke up in the central chamber. The amber sac was glowing blindingly bright. The cables were detaching from the walls. The ship was shaking. Gravity reversed. "We have to go," Momo screamed. She grabbed Okarun and Gigi. "The ship is leaving." They ran. They didn't have to fight the drones anymore. The drones had collapsed. They were lifeless husks. The central intelligence had withdrawn all processing power to the engines. They slid down the fleshy tunnel. They burst out of the opening just as it sealed shut. Seiko was waiting for them. She grabbed them and pulled them behind a concrete barrier. The ground shook as the Serpo ship engaged its thrusters. It didn't use fire. It used gravity. The earth groaned as the massive weight lifted. The webs that covered the city snapped. The sound was like suspension cables breaking. Tens of thousands of cables whipped through the air, slicing through buildings. The cocoon fell apart. The ship rose. It was a dark sun ascending. It moved slowly at first, then faster. It was heading for the crack in the sky. The purple wound in reality pulsed as the ship approached. Inside the core, Peter Parker was no longer fighting. He was piloting. He was merged fully with the Serpo Prime. He felt the engines as his own legs. He felt the reactor as his own heart. He looked at the city below one last time. He saw the destruction. He saw the scar he had made on the world. He was sorry, but he was also proud. He had protected them. He aimed the ship at the center of the breach. The void called to him. It was a place where physics didn't matter, a place where a spider could rest. Initiating containment protocol, Peter thought. Target, self. The ship hit the breach. There was no sound, just a sudden distortion of light. The sky folded in on itself, the colors inverted. For a moment, the entire city of Tokyo was bathed in negative light. Then the ship was gone, and the breach went with it. The crack in the sky zipped shut. The clouds rushed in to fill the vacuum. The purple hue faded, replaced by the grey of a normal rainy day. Silence returned to Shinjuku. But this time it was different. It was the silence of aftermath. The webs were dissolving, turning into grey dust that coated everything. The spider drones were melting into puddles of harmless sludge. The people who had been trapped in the sleep were waking up. They were confused, weak, but alive. Momo stood up. She looked at the empty sky. Rain began to fall. It washed the dust from her face. She felt a phantom pain in her mind, a connection that had been severed. "He's gone," Akaran said softly. He adjusted his glasses, which were cracked. "He saved us," Gigi said. The evil eye had receded, leaving Gigi tired and bruised. That was a good fight. A sad fight. Seiko lit a new cigarette. She took a long drag. She looked at the crater where the ship had been. It was a deep lake, now filling with groundwater and rain. "He didn't just save us," she said. "He balanced the ledger. He took the bad karma with him. Days turned into weeks. The recovery of Tokyo was slow. The government tried to cover it up, but the physical evidence was too massive. Shinjuku was a ruin. The webbing had dissolved, but the buildings it had crushed remained crushed. The story became a legend. The day the sky broke and the spider fell. Momo went back to school. She tried to study. She tried to be normal. But she found herself looking at the corners of rooms, looking for cobwebs. She kept a piece of iron spike. It was her souvenir. One afternoon, she was walking home with Okarun. They walked past a construction site where they were rebuilding a park. There was a statue there. It was the guardian dog that had been corrupted in the first hour of the invasion. It had been cleaned and repaired. Sitting on the head of the statue was a small spider, a normal garden spider. It was weaving a web. Momo stopped. She watched the spider work. It was precise. It was patient. It was building a home in a world that was too big for it. Okarun stopped beside her. "What is it?" he asked. Momo smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. Nothing she said, just a friend. She reached out and touched the stone of the statue. She sent a small pulse of psychic energy into the web. Not enough to break it, just enough to make it shimmer. "Goodbye, Peter," she whispered. The spider paused, then continued its work. Far away in the space between universes, a ship drifted. It was dead. The reactor was cold. The metal was frozen. But deep inside, in the heart of the machine, there was a flicker, a single red light blinking in the dark. It wasn't a distress signal. It was a heartbeat. The spider was sleeping. He was lost in the infinite, but he was alive. And in the multiverse, survival is the only victory that matters. The world of DANDADAN healed. The scars remained, but they became part of the landscape. The spirits returned to their tunnels. The aliens retreated to the stars. And the story of the boy who spun a web of iron and blood became a ghost story told by yokai to frighten their children. A myth of a hero who was too heavy for the world to hold. The monitors on the shield helicarrier displayed only static. Nick Fury stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the white noise where a biosignal used to be. The dimensional breach trace had vanished 48 hours ago. The signal from the advanced suit was gone. There was no body to recover. There was no crash site to investigate. Just a hole in the sky that had sewn itself shut, leaving no scar on the atmosphere, only a void in the data. Nova slammed his fist onto the console. He shouted that they had to send a probe, that they had to keep looking. Fury shook his head slowly. The physics were clear. The boy had not just left the sector, he had left the continuum. He was gone. The file was not closed, but it was archived under the designation MIA, multiversal. The team stood in silence. They were used to losing soldiers, but they were not used to losing family to math they could not solve. 6 months later in Tokyo, the rain still tasted different. It had a metallic tang that the scientists called residual ionization, but the old women in the markets called dragon tears. The crater in Shinjuku had been filled with water and turned into a memorial park. It was a quiet place. The grass grew faster there than anywhere else in the city. At the center of the lake stood a simple stone marker. It did not have a name because the government still officially denied the details of the event. But the people knew. They left offerings at the water's edge, not flowers. They left red and blue origami. They left small mechanical parts. They left comic books. A new urban legend had taken root in the shadows of the district. The local delinquents whispered about the Phantom Weaver. They said that if you were being mugged, or if the spirits were harassing you in the dark alleys near the station, you would see a red light blink in those shadows. They said a figure with too many arms would descend from the power lines to wrap the bad luck in silk. The police dismissed it as mass hallucination caused by the trauma of the evacuation. But the yokai knew better. The turbo granny refused to enter Shinjuku anymore. She said the territory was marked. She said the spider was not dead. He was just spread thin. He had become a guardian spirit, a kamae of the concrete web. Momo Ayase walked through the park on her way to university entrance exams. She paused at the lake. The water was still. She felt the heavy, familiar weight of the atmosphere. It wasn't oppressive anymore. It felt safe. She adjusted her scarf. She didn't look for him in the sky anymore. She looked for him in the patterns of the city, in the way the traffic lights synchronized, in the way the construction cranes looked like legs against the sunset. She knew the truth. He wasn't a god, and he wasn't a ghost. He was a frequency. And sometimes, when the city was loud enough, she could hear the hum of his responsibility vibrating in the ground beneath her feet. The multiverse was infinite and cruel, but it was also connected. Somewhere in the deep dark between the stars, a web was holding the pieces together. And that was enough.